So I'm Rachel Newman. I'm a National Policy and Grassroots Organizer with Know Your Nine, and Know Your Nine is a youth-led project that empowers students to end sexual and gender-based violence within their schools and educational communities. And today I want to be talking about generally the state of Title IX and what that looks like right now, because right now is it?
I'll take this out. I don't know what this is.
You're good.
Sorry.
Right now is very unprecedented times for Title IX policy and a lot of ups and downs and how that relates to student survivors of sexual harassment and violence. Louder. Okay. Do you have the PowerPoint? So I'm kind of curious, while we get that up, I am curious who has any sort of background knowledge on Title IX. If you can give kind of just like a hands or like a thumbs up or a, yeah, love to see it. A lot of people my age don't know much of anything about Title IX, and it impacts students directly, which is a very unfortunate thing to see. So the more I get to talk about it in the community, the better, of course. So today we're talking about the state of Title IX and specifically what is Title IX. We have 37 words that make up Title IX in the spirit of Title IX. And are you still having trouble hearing me? I'm sorry. You can hear me? Okay. So there are only 37 words that make up the actual text of Title IX, and that governs our entire Title IX policy of just a huge body of federal registers that we follow in schools. And Title IX is a federal civil rights legislation that protects survivors within schools, as well as multiple protected classes of students. So as I was saying, it's a federal civil rights law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of gender and sex. And we'll kind of get into that distinction in a little bit. But it includes the right to education that is free from violence, especially with protection from retaliation against educational institutions, with access to accommodations throughout the whole process. It applies to all schools, including our K-12 schools here in Citrus County, as well as even some private schools now. Because of the COVID pandemic, a lot of schools started accepting federal funds. And the minute a school accepts 1 cent in federal funding, the school has to be compliant with Title IX federal registers. We see equity through Title IX in all aspects of education. Of course, most people, when they hear Title IX, they think sports. So we have it in athletics, but we also have it in academics and any educational program or activities that are affiliated with the educational institution. So Title IX protects specifically student athletes, as just mentioned, pregnant and parenting students, LGBTQI+ students, students seeking access to abortion or reproductive care, and student survivors of any incident like sexual harassment, assault, dating violence, stalking, etc. It's important whenever we talk about Title IX to also bring up the legal system. Title IX in recent history has become very legal, and in its actual grievance procedure, it functions a lot like civil legal proceedings. And it's also important to talk about the legal system as a whole whenever we talk about Title IX, because a lot of students don't have the option to go through the traditional criminal justice means of seeking justice and healing from a traumatic experience of harm that they've had on their campus. And going through action through their school, through Title IX proceedings may be the only real option for them. In Title IX policy, we see that the burden of proof is preponderance of the evidence, or more likely than not. And of course, in the criminal justice system, we see beyond a reasonable doubt. And a lot of times in instances of cases like sexual violence, there's not a lot of physical evidence, if any. And so reporting through the school, through a Title IX proceeding, may be the most likely way for that survivor to get justice and healing in their situation. So here's a little timeline. I hope is it easy to see up there? Okay, perfect. So Title IX was passed back in 1972, and notably in 2011, a Dear Colleague letter through the Office for Civil Rights was released by the Obama administration, and this put forward a lot of forward-thinking ideals and survivor-oriented just ideas within Title IX registers, and it really set a standard. And then we flash forward to 2020, where the Trump administration's Department of Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos, finalized new Title IX rules. And that ended up rolling back a lot of protections that we once saw within our Title IX federal registers. A little bit of history. One of Joe Biden's special interests as VP was Title IX. He was very involved in the Violence Against Women Act as well. And so whenever he came into office, a lot of people were expecting really solid Title IX registers to come around very quickly, and they did not. So then you see here in the 2022 to 2023 range, a lot of advocacy groups, including my group, Know Your Nine, went ahead and began petitioning the Department of Education to go ahead and release new registers to replace the Trump administration's registers. There were a lot of delays, and finally it was released, proposed rules, the final set of them, released in April 2023, and they were set to be actually implemented in August 1st, 2024. And a lot of legal issues came up, and we'll get into that in a second, but all those legal issues and it being brought forward so late into his term made it to where just this past January, it was rescinded before many places could even implement the rule. So as mentioned, in Trump's first term, we have DeVos. The Secretary of Education overall is who gets to write the federal registers, which are the laws that govern Title IX grievance procedures. She rolled back lots of protections, and in general, all of these students were waiting for new guidance from the Biden administration to come forward, and they were left waiting. In the second Trump term so far, we have, of course, lots of efforts to dismantle the Department of Education, and the Department of Education is the entity that implements and oversees Title IX. And just this past January, Trump went ahead and rescinded Biden's new Title IX rule that was pretty much overwhelmingly blocked. And that means that now all schools that receive federal funding are now back to Trump's 2020 rule. So we are blanket under 2020 Trump rule again in terms of Title IX. So to talk briefly about some specific policy points that we have, what specifically happens now in schools with it being back in place. We have a lot of non-survivor oriented policy being put into place. And most importantly, what I want to highlight is that a lot of cases that were initiated under Biden's rule in his registers now have to be reviewed again under the guidelines of Trump's rule, which means a lot of cases are going to go drastically different ways than they would have originally gone. And a lot of cases are even going to be dismissed. One of the first controversial and non-survivor oriented aspects of this policy is that schools must only address harassment if it is considered severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive, and that it has to effectively deny equal access to a school program or activity. So as you can see with very strong language like this, it narrows the scope of what sexual harassment looks like to the individual who's interpreting these cases. It puts burden back on the students to prove that what they experienced was severe enough to warrant a response from their school. And institutions now have the freedom to go ahead and drop whatever case they deem fit. So I want to bring up a few different terms whenever I talk about this slide. Just again, all of it has gotten very legal and whatnot, and it brings in a lot of confusing terms. But schools cannot respond with deliberate indifference in response to harassment is specifically the guideline for what schools' standard response should be. And when we talk about deliberate indifference, we talk about something called actual knowledge. And actual knowledge is when the school first gains understanding that something under the Title IX scope has occurred. And that can be through overhearing students talking, a formal report, or a teacher overhears something and reports it back to a Title IX coordinator, anything like that. Once the school hears that something could have taken place that falls under that scope, the school has received actual knowledge. At that point, they cannot respond with deliberate indifference, which would be not acting promptly, not providing supportive measures, which we'll talk about in a second, and things like that. And acting deliberately with indifference opens up the educational institution to vicarious liability, putting them on par with the respondent in the case or the person who has caused the harm to the complainant or student survivor. So this vague guideline, of course, does not properly provide any sort of standard for schools to be responding to this harassment, and this leads to lots of opportunities for institutions to just respond overall inadequately. And once again, burden is back on students to prove if their harassment was responded to deliberately and differently by their school if they choose to file a complaint with the Office for Civil Rights, saying that their school has violated their Title IX rights by acting in this way. So for the next piece of policy, talking about location, harassment can only be addressed if it occurs on campus or on grounds, or if it has to be inside the United States. So of course, this effectively eliminates upperclassmen in college who may have off-campus housing, parties, things like that, where it still involves two students. And it also, of course, disqualifies incidents that may have happened on study abroad trips. And much of the harassment that we see does occur off campus because lots of students live off campus and go to events off campus. And it's important to make the distinction that discrimination that originates off campus continues to the on campus setting, as these students are still going and having to see the person who caused them this harm, and they're still having to see these reminders every day and know that their school is not taking care of them properly through the situation. So for complainant status, harassment can only be addressed if the complainant was participating in or trying to participate in school at the time of filing the complaint. This is in terms of how long you have before you can't file a complaint anymore. It's not a specific timing, it's more just that they have to be trying to participate or participating. And the reason why this is a negative is because a lot of students who go through situations like these feel pressured to drop out or transfer institutions to escape the situation that's been created for them. And at this point, now the abuser is going unchecked on campus, and the school is not obligated to respond to any sort of complaint. And this also includes people going on tours on schools or visiting schools and things like that. So in higher education, only high-ranking employees are required to notify the Title IX coordinator if they hear of something that falls underneath the scope. And this brings up kind of an interesting conversation. Whenever we talk about survivor advocacy, we talk a lot about empowerment and autonomy. So we want survivors to be able to make their own choice if they want to report what's happened to them and they want to go through with any sort of case, whether that's, of course, criminal or Title IX. And whenever you have a situation where there's mandated reporting involved, there are pros and cons that just need to be discussed from that angle. And in this specific policy guideline, when it has only high-ranking employees, of course, not everybody's a mandated reporter at that point, and not everybody's speaking to mandated reporters. So people are missing out on the opportunity to know more about their rights. And I know from our stance, a good way of looking at it, a good balance is having it to where everybody is required to provide the student, if they hear of something that falls under the Title IX scope, with the information of how to report their incident and the contact information of who to report it to, rather than a mandated report. So for party questioning, this is another thing that became very controversial within the 2020 Trump rule. In the grievance procedure, we have a live hearing that the respondent and the complainant attend. And both sides have the right to advisors, and a lot of times they might turn into attorney advisors as well. And at this live hearing, both sides have to be live cross-examined by each other's attorney advisor. So you have people who have gone through trauma who are now having to be cross-examined by their abuser's attorney live in front of their abuser at school. And this, of course, makes it re-traumatizing during the Title IX process and can discourage a lot of students from seeking a Title IX case because they simply don't want to have to be in a live hearing with their abuser, don't want to have to be cross-examined on what they experienced. And so that is definitely a big one that survivors deal with in terms of the Title IX grievance procedure itself. So when it comes to Title IX and LGBTQI+ students, yes, it's gone back and forth of if Title IX protects these students or not. And one distinction that I kind of brought up earlier and I want to bring up again is that the Biden administration looked at the original text of Title IX and determined that sex and gender could be used interchangeably within the meaning of the Title IX text, so that if people were being discriminated against based on their gender identity or sexual orientation, that would then fall under a Title IX claim, and they would have the right to file a complaint and go through that process. These new protections have been eliminated due to going back to Trump's rule that does not include these protections. And this was also confounded on the fact that Trump released an executive order where he gave his own definition of sex and gender identity. And he rejected the idea that discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender can be constituted as sex discrimination. So for Title IX and how it relates to pregnant and parenting students, Trump's Title IX rule does not have explicit protections, and Biden's Title IX rule did, but it was rescinded. No rules have since been established to make any sort of distinction either way. So schools are still encouraged to provide accommodations to pregnant and parenting students, such as elevator access, bigger desks, areas and times to express milk, things like that. So when we talk about Title IX, a big factor of Title IX is supportive measures. And supportive measures are accommodations that the school provides to the complainant, and it's designed to restore or preserve equal access to the student survivor's educational program or activity. And really, the accommodation can be anything that meets the student's needs. Commonly, we see opportunities to retake any sort of classes or tests, deadline extensions, opportunities for free counseling, changes in class schedule so that the respondent and complainant don't have to see each other. But like I said, they can get really creative, and it is the school's responsibility whenever an incident is first comes to their attention, whenever they receive that actual knowledge, to promptly offer supportive measures to the complainant. In terms of retaliation from the educational institution back onto the student, it is interesting because the Trump 2020 Federal Registers were the first to formally name retaliation and define it and make a section for it. And how the Trump 2020 rule governs retaliation as a whole is that, of course, no one can threaten, discriminate, or punish anyone to deal with their Title IX rights because they reported any sort of discrimination or because they participate in or refuse to participate in any sort of effort that was addressing that sex-based discrimination. So schools can charge students with code of conduct violations for making false statements, but it cannot be based just on the findings of the Title IX case that they had. So if a complainant has a case and the respondent is found not responsible, that complainant cannot be charged with a code of conduct violation just because their respondent was not found responsible. And schools must provide supportive measures to students who are experiencing retaliation as well, and they must investigate all complaints that they receive regarding retaliation. And so I know that was a lot of policy information. That can be kind of dry, but does anybody have any questions or anything related to that I just went over?
How does Florida's attack against trans impact what Title IX originally was set up to do? The way so many have moved out of state for not getting the medication. Is there a parallel thing that you could explain how that weaves into the intent of the concept?
Mhm.
Why aren't they getting it, and what cases might you refer to that has led to suicide?
Rachel, could you repeat the question because you're my.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry, I was
No,
meandering.
you're good.
So my understanding is that it is basically kind of the connection between trans attacks and the way Title IX policy is going and how that's relating to people leaving the state and suicide rates.
Yeah.
Okay. So kind of it becomes a tricky topic because the Title IX text is only based on 37 words, and we have a body of federal registers, and it's just based on those 37 words. So we had the Biden administration take the phrase on the basis of sex, and he determined, his Department of Education, they determined that gender identity, sexual orientation factored into that overall concept of sex, making, of course, trans people a protected class within Title IX protections. And I think to a lot of people it makes sense that this would be included. But we also see Title IX a lot of the times when you see Title IX in the news, at least when I see Title IX in the news, it's hardly ever for reasons of supporting students through any sort of sexual or domestic violence that they experience, through their school. It's more often than not some sort of story about trans women on some sort of sports team, and we need Title IX to defend all women, and that's what's going to do it. And that kind of weaponization of Title IX, and that's not what Title IX stands for at all, is really how we see Title IX used in contemporary times. And it's unfortunate because Title IX, when you look at the actual text, when you really understand it and you study it, it of course fits LGBTQI plus students into it. It is meant to protect them. But then you have people taking that same text and using it to tear down and just absolutely defame a whole class of people that is also a tiny class of people. Trans women athletes is not a large number of people. So when I see this, it just is definitely like frustrating from kind of an advocacy standpoint, and frustrating to students who know of Title IX, frustrating to students in general who hear of any sort of news relating to it. And I think overall, we need to, and there are ways to, but we need to get back to a better understanding of those 37 words to be able to make, that pro-student oriented registers again.
Thank you.
So I really agree with you about the weaponization because I come from a Republican background and I've seen how they're using this. I'm no longer a Republican. I've totally deconstructed. I think it's awful what's happening to people in the world with our human rights. My question is, because I have a cousin that considers herself a moderate Democrat, and she chose not to vote for a Democrat president this time around because she didn't like the process. She didn't like the idea of women, trans women playing sports. That was the weaponization for her. And then there was another thing that to me didn't even make sense. But how many in Florida had tried to play sports, trans women, and it was an issue. Like you said, it's a very small number. So how many to make this big, huge case to turn people against voting for Kamala Harris?
Okay, yes.
Or to not vote at all?
Yes, so the question is, how many trans women athletes in the state of Florida? Is that the question? In the state of Florida? And basically how that contributes to that weaponization, political weaponization. And I don't have an exact stat on the state of Florida, but I can give you an exact stat on the country. It's 10.
That's right there. Oh my God.
So I don't know that there is one in Florida.
So I want to ask something here.
Yes.
Is, can you stand up and share so other people can hear? Sure. I spend a lot of time on Facebook posting things that I'm learning about the truth concerning, because I had to listen to my husband for 38 years disrespect Democrats and women and gays and racists. I mean, I had to live with that. And he would call me a bleeding heart liberal. And now I really think I am. But everybody to, if they're in Facebook at all, friend with me, because I love to share information and I definitely want to write about that number 10.
Just to preface and give further clarification, that's the NCAA. Their statistic is 10 college level female trans athletes. That's where I get the 10 from. Yes. Yeah.
What about the
There's
flip
no,
side?
I've checked, like I've tried looking into the stats for specifically high school, and those stats just don't exist. The number is so small. It's so hard to get a full report on it.
Yeah.
The stats just don't exist. The only real stat you can find is the NCAA one, and that's 10.
So what is your opinion about the issues that really do affect women playing sports who are biologically men? They're trans women, granted, but biologically you can't compete against a testosterone level male. And that, I mean, I'm all for everyone having rights, but I think that the trans women are using this. I mean, Title IX was so I could have sport. I was before sports, women. And so now this is actually giving a testosterone male a chance to play against me, and it takes my rights away as a female. And I mean, I'm in the middle of that. I think they should have rights, but I don't think biologically, I agree that it's not an equal playing field. What do you think?
Did everybody hear that, or do you want me to
I disagree.
repeat it? So basically just kind of my perspective on the idea of trans women having levels of testosterone that would make it unfair for assigned female at birth athletes to compete against. Kind of the main response that I understand with that is that a lot of, I mean, transness looks different for everybody. Everybody has a different experience with how they express their transgender identity. But when we're talking about specifically just the NCAA, because we have stats on it, these trans women are on hormones. So if you put these trans women who are on estrogen and you put them on a male sports team, they no longer can compete because they're going against people who have full testosterone. They don't anymore. So that's how we see that, is that they're going to be on par with hormone replacement therapy. So,
But granted, the hormone replacement therapy does not erase their biological development of their musculature as with testosterone. So that does not erase their previous 300-pound musculature. I mean, it just doesn't. I don't know the right answer.
Mhm.
It's not fair either way.
If I may for just a moment, this isn't exactly a question, but I am a biological woman. I have higher testosterone than a normal person because I have PCOS. And I have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And it means the level of testosterone in my body is higher than a woman's should be. And it causes lots of problems with period and other things that I won't get into. But if we are defining sports based totally on testosterone and estrogen levels, I would also not be able to play these sports. And that's an important thing to consider, is that every single person has different levels of testosterone and estrogen. And so you would have to even that playing field entirely if you wanted total terms, because every single person has certain biological advantages that make them better or less prone to sports. And so I think it's really just an overblowing of the whole situation of, oh my goodness, these trans women have more testosterone. But then you can look at the average female athlete, and they may also have more testosterone for a variety of reasons. And so I think it's really just a bit of an over-exaggeration in terms of how different we really are.
For you.
And I think that's an important perspective to have, is that everyone has different hormone levels that affect them personally.
Thank you.
It is true, but there is a whole difference. I mean, I don't have PCOS, but I haven't ever had my testosterone level tested, but just physiologically, I'm certain mine are higher than other females that are, smaller and not as strong and have boobs, and I don't. But it is a quandary. I don't say that it's right or wrong. I think that sometimes we're taking away the Title IX for women. We had to fight so long to even get any kind of sports. And I don't know, it's a mess. I agree.
But it's not there now. So there's nothing to say, oh, I wish it would be this or that. It's not in effect. Look what DeVos did. Look what this other idiot is doing to totally dismantle the Department of Education. That is the only pillar left for so many egregious things that have occurred. And that's what the whole federal education department is supposed to be there to do, is not dole out policy per se, but to be the protector of those groups.
Rachel, I could tell you this breaks my heart, but it doesn't just break my heart. It rips it out of my chest. It stomps on it, and then it shoves it back in. That all the rights that women had when I was your age are gone now.
Yeah.
So do you have more slides that can tell us what we can do? If you have somebody who is telling us, okay, this department is gone, this law is gone, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, great. I have a 17-year-old granddaughter who is a junior in high school. She'll be going to college a year from now. I don't see her very often. She's out of state, but I'll see her in May, and I want to have a talk with her. I need help. I don't know what to say, and I don't know if it's even my business. But I just feel like her rights have evaporated. She's got her first boyfriend. I don't know what her parents are doing to help her. So yeah, that's what I need to know. Okay.
So the biggest thing here is to understand what's going on with our current policies, because the more you understand about the current policies, the more you can know whether, of course, you agree or disagree with them, and you can make lasting change on them. It's important in terms of engaging in advocacy spaces, which I know a lot of us here engage in advocacy spaces, but whenever you are getting into advocacy, to identify what your boundaries are and what role of advocacy you fit into. Because a lot of people, when they think of the typical activist or advocate, they think of somebody at the front of a march with a megaphone, and not everybody is just desiring to be that. But there's a lot that goes into advocacy and activism for issues like this. And a big part of it is just, of course, studying on it and talking to people in your community about it. And a big thing, of course, right now is urging your members of Congress to protect the Department of Education. That's ongoing, and will continue to be ongoing. And voting, how it connects to voting. It's very important because the Department of Education is specifically what enforces Title IX and what makes all the Title IX rules what they are. It's important to be educating ourselves on what are, especially on the federal level, representatives and presidents, how they align with education, survivors' rights, LGBTQ rights, all of those things. And being able to kind of understand their background on those things, their opinions on those things will tell you if that administration will be a champion for strong Title IX federal registers. And then you'll be able to have a more, in my opinion, well-rounded vote because you'll be voting on, just an extra issue, Title IX. But that's kind of the main things that I see with that is just important to educate on what's going on with Title IX and being open to talking about other people. We need advocates of all types and not just students. We need everybody to be able to go and defend students. The more voices, the better. Title IX policy is national, so it's federally regulated. Florida doesn't have a different policy. However, schools, we want to be holding schools accountable in our area. We want to be holding schools accountable because we want our schools to not just be thinking about compliance with Title IX registers, but go more into caring for the student individually. And Title IX, the federal registers, we view them as not the ceiling, but the floor. We want schools to be able to implement their own policies that they can bring into the Title IX policy in conjunction with it and be able to fully support students better. And we see a lot just in our own community. It's important, not just education on the policies as a whole, but education on what your community is doing with these policies. Is our school district being compliant to begin with? Is our school district being caring? And if not, what are our options? And of course, there are different options, of course, like reporting to the OCR, Office for Civil Rights, if you believe that the school district is committing some sort of Title IX violation. But just overall being able to hold our schools accountable, go to school board meetings and say, so Title IX, have you thought about that in a while? Because we see this a lot, especially, and I think this is kind of pertinent to our area since we have, Citrus County schools, we have our K through 12 schools. And Title IX still very much applies to K-12 schools. And parents don't know that Title IX applies to their children. They have no clue. And yes,
From sort of got it, the Department of Education, where there's nothing there, so how is all this gonna be handled when there's nobody there to handle it? I mean, unless he wants to pass everything to the state and get over the Department of Ed. So I just, to me, he's dismantling as much as he can to get rid of everything.
yes. So the question was,
How much is left of the Department of Education to even deal with it?
yes. So yes, how much of the Department of Education is left to deal with Title IX? That's a good way of putting it. So yes, Trump is, effectively gutting the Department of Education currently. He is taking out all the different tasks that the department runs and he's giving it to other entities, just by that effect, making the Department of Education super small and having no power. And whenever we talk about Title IX specifically, what will happen to Title IX is that, well, first off, I do want to make the clarification that the Department of Education cannot be abolished with an executive order. It can only be abolished by an act of Congress. So that is one thing. So that's why there's still time to talk to your representatives and ensure that they at least know your opinion. on the matter. And so when we talk about Title IX specifically, since we're looking at it being dismantled, it's of course possible policy could go back to the states in terms of how policy is actually written. But what they're mainly looking at is potentially sending Title IX enforcement to the Department of Justice,
Well,
which
I mean, it's like, people that should be doing stuff to protect us as Americans are bending the knee, you know, and it's like the terror. To me, he's a bully. You know, he wants Denmark, he wants Greenland, he does all this crazy stuff. So I think it's the midterm vote that we have to do the midterm. That's where we're gonna get.
yes, midterm vote. Okay.
Tell your friends, get out, so.
Yes.
Especially the women.
In 1972, I think Title IX written, it was just, if your school had a boys basketball team, then the girls should have a basketball team. I think that's basically what started that Title IX. Now, many athletes, female athletes, have been cheated out of titles because some male pretending he's a woman steps into the competition and wins. Obviously, a man is stronger than a woman, and he will win in a swimming competition or other sport competition. It's very basic. We used to have a very basic way to tell men from women, and now we can't seem to tell a boy from a girl. So we're very confused in our culture. But you put that, God made a man, God made a woman. God, you know, there are two sexes. Not all these generalizations in between. So we're just sort of.
yeah, right, correct.
Okay. Further questions, comments?
I have a comment.
Sure.
She's saying,
Oh,
Yeah.
waiting. Unless you have studied the biology of sexuality, you may be missing a lot of concepts. The young lady over there that talked about differences in testosterone and progesterone and all of those. There are multiple. It's a spectrum. It is not just male or just female. There are people who appear to be female at birth, but because of their body chemistry, they begin to show male characteristics as an adolescent. There are children born who appear to be male who develop female characteristics at adolescence, and a whole bunch of other combinations. My experience with this was in a level 1 trauma center, actually 2, where we had neonatal intensive care units. And I saw these variations every day for 30 years. It is not just male or just female. It doesn't work that way. And if you look at the biology, talk to a pediatrician, talk to a neonatologist. They can give you specific examples.
and God made them that way.
Yes, that's the way they are. That's the way they were born.
And you can see this is opening up a lot of discussion.
But the other question that I have
Mhm.
is it possible to make your presentation available to pass on to my 17-year-old granddaughter, who is very bright and an athlete, and also stands up for what she believes is right.
This presentation is being recorded. It's going to be on YouTube. If you get the newsletter, the link to the newsletter will be there and it'll be on the website.
Vicki, I just want to comment on that. I think Joanne may be asking for the presentation itself. We're a nonpartisan league, but of course we all have our particular points of view. But I don't know. I would too like it. I was going to ask if you have like a one pager. We love our one pagers, you know, something that we could give to people. But I too would like to see your presentation again, but I'm not sure if really all of our discussion belongs in it. That's my 2 cents.
Were you talking about the actual PowerPoint? Or were you talking
Either
about the
one.
recording?
I can totally make a PDF of everything and give it to you, and you guys can give it out, and
I have it on my computer
oh
now.
yeah,
so-
that works too.
Great. There's some good videos out there on YouTube that explain the spectrum and show the X, Y, that X. I mean, it really helped me understand. If we don't know anybody personally that's transgender, then we're going to be ignorant. And so we have to educate ourselves to see what the spectrum really is so that we can grow in compassion.
If you know people, it makes a difference. Trans
Yes.
people that I've known, women, they're prettier, they take better care of themselves, and they make me sick. They make me sick. But this is opening up a lot of conversation, so a bunch of us are going to go to Las Magueyas when we're done here. And Rachel and Haley would like to invite you to come with us if you can. And we can continue talking about these issues. Did we have any other questions?
In my years, as I've gotten older, I've gotten a little bit more, I've gotten a little bit.
Louder, please.
I've gotten a little bit more open-minded, and I don't know if it's really wisdom that I have, but I understand people that don't understand other people. I understand because I don't understand these people. But what I have learned is, I think, is that if I don't understand someone or their way, maybe I shouldn't be making decisions. Because I really don't understand. I don't understand trans. I don't know how they feel. I don't even know a trans person. I don't think I could one. But I don't know. But to me, it's wrong to put them in a category and to discriminate against them or lesbians or gay or all these different groups of people, because I really can't put myself in their shoes.
And that's why we need a League of Women Voters.
And to me, it's just something I've learned over the years, because I see the ugliness that comes out of it, making decisions for other people.
Yes.
We just don't understand.
Okay.
Rachel, I just want to compliment you. You really know your stuff. I thought the way you outlined things and explained the sequence of events over the years was right on. And also the emphasis that this is really about protecting people. It's about safety. You know, and I think the whole athletics thing is turned into a thought result that we have to be concerned about this in our community. So yeah, we got to go vote, national and state, but we really need to help the people in our community and try to look at the schools.
Yes.
How the judicial does fit in here. I mean, if sexual abuse is a crime also. So how has that worked together with when the education was adjudicating some of these cases? How did that fit in with the judicial system?
Sure. So, like I kind of mentioned, Title IX focuses on a burden of proof of being preponderance of the evidence, or more likely than not. And then, of course, we know beyond a reasonable doubt is our criminal justice system. So what ends up happening is that sometimes we have people who start Title IX cases at their school who concurrently have a case in the judicial system. They might have also reported that way. But Title IX specifically focuses on what they're going to do with the respondent at the school and how they're going to provide supportive measures. Those are the two key central things: supportive measures to restore that complainant's access to education, and then if they're going to place sanctions, on the respondent if they're found responsible after the proceedings. And when we look at that, a lot of people, that is their truest form of justice because so many people do not have access to physical DNA, wherever that may be. A lot of people don't know the process of getting something like a rape kit done, so they might have missed out on getting some of the DNA. A lot of people just have a fear of going through the criminal justice system because of how re-traumatizing it can be. And that is a totally fair response to that. And going through something like a Title IX proceeding instead is something that can be more just attainable since it has that different burden of proof. And it is supposed to be less invasive. And just in general, Title IX also focuses a little bit on, I didn't really touch on this because this goes into like heavy, like what the grievance procedure looks like, which is, but when we talk about justice, we also can bring up the conversation of restorative justice and what that looks like, because we don't just have criminal justice as our only option. We also have restorative justice and transformative justice, and those could be real options if we pursued them. And Title IX kind of plays with the idea of restorative justice. And restorative justice, for anybody who's not aware, is a form of justice that doesn't focus on the legal system. It doesn't focus on prison. It focuses on more so kind of more mediation type route where the person responsible admits that they're responsible and gives a fully informed and full meaning apology, and they learn how to not commit that harm again towards that person or towards anybody else through that process. That's restorative justice. And Title IX has a portion, one of the options. So we have the full adjudication process, which is what I mentioned with the live questioning. That goes to like a full hearing where somebody's found responsible or not responsible. But we also have an option that can happen in lieu of that, and that is the informal resolution process where they do a mediation type thing, and that mimics more of that restorative justice that I just was kind of talking about. And for a lot of people, restorative justice is a lot fuller of an experience because when you have just your abuser walked away with no sense of they haven't taken accountability, like the state may have taken it for you, the state may have taken their accountability for them, but they haven't taken accountability. This gives you an option and gives the respondent an option to fully take that accountability and not commit that harm again, if that makes sense.
They learned their lesson.
One more question. I know this is so bad. I recently joined Facebook page. May have been a mistake, Citrus County Commission, word of mouth. Oh, wow. It's awful. My head is spinning. There was something yesterday, a mom was posting about her daughter who does not have access to social media was being bullied by girls in school, and she was being called an ugly girl. So here's my question to you. Where does bullying at school cross over into sexual harassment?
I love this question. Thank you for asking it. Okay. So the question is where and how, if does bullying, especially kind of how I'm gathering, and I know the post you're talking about. How does that fit into sexual harassment? Does it? The answer is yes, it absolutely fits into sexual harassment. And that's why it's so important for parents in this county to know that their children are protected by Title IX in the K-12 setting. Because bullying, any bullying that starts bringing up gender terms like that, we see all the time, watch my language, my mild language for a second, but we see like in middle school, girls calling each other like sluts and whores and things like that. That is Title IX, 100% Title IX. And that is like a full way because we see all the time, and I'm in that Facebook group, I see all the time parents saying, my child's being bullied in this way. And I read it and it's in the scope of Title IX. My child's being bullied in this way and I'm reporting it to the school and they're ignoring me, or they're not doing anything, or they're saying they can't do anything about it. That means that they have now heard of something that falls under the Title IX scope. They're supposed to be addressing it through the lens of Title IX. And it's not happening. So that's why it's like, as a community, We need to be looking at how is Title IX being actually utilized in our K-12 schools, because a lot of times K-12 schools are not utilizing Title IX. They're not compliant because of staffing issues, lots of students, lack of expertise, things like that. So it's our responsibility as constituents, our responsibility as just community members to be looking at our district and seeing, are they being compliant? Are they even on a base level being compliant? Before we even get to the level of, are they being caring? So I think that's a big one that we talk about, because whenever we have parents who are reporting this bullying that does fall under the scope of Title IX to the school, that's actual knowledge, right?
So, at that point, the parents should go back and say, Title
Yes, absolutely.
I. They may not know, a lot of people.
Yes, they don't know. They don't know. It's a huge problem. And I know for a fact that like it's a requirement for the contact information of coordinators to be public, because the coordinators who you report to, if you have an issue like this, and for a time, I don't know about currently, but for a time, there was no way to find the coordinator.
In the school, you mean?
Yeah, so there's one, and this is common for K-12. K-12 will typically have one coordinator for a whole district, which is kind of what leads to that like there's just lack of resources. You have one person doing all Title IX related incidents for an entire district of schools, while also that's usually not their principal job. They have a job and then they just slapped on Title IX coordinator on top of it because they needed somebody to be designated Title IX coordinator. So what we see there is just a lot slips through the cracks, to the point that, and again, I don't know about currently, I haven't checked it recently, but for a time, it wasn't public who the coordinator was. You couldn't find that contact information for our county.
Do you know it now? Who
I
it is?
I do know who it is now. It's kind of given back and forth. I had to like research a little bit, but I believe currently it is Todd Goolsby.
For the
Currently,
whole county or school?
for the whole county.
Does the school have to have a designated person?
No, no. Some places do though. They call them liaisons. But I know Citrus doesn't, and a lot of places don't. That's not just a Citrus thing. So,
What about school social workers or guidance counselors? Can they pass it on? I know they're not required to report.
ooh, so yes. Yeah, I didn't bring this up just because it wasn't super relevant, but I will now. So on the one slide where it was talking about mandated reporting, it said in higher education, only high-ranking employees are mandated to report. However, in K-12, every single employee is a mandated reporter. Yes.
Currently, well, firstly, I just want to make this as a comment because I'm an oldster back there in the 60s, 70s, and 80s that really fought for this right for women's athletes. Like, I met a lot of people, I don't think the younger generation understand how hard it was for women to have the right to play sports, or to go to college and have a right to have the same gym that the men did. I mean, we're talking big universities would have these glorious things for the men, and the women couldn't even practice in it. They had to go to the high school down the street. These are the gut issues that we were fighting for when we fought for Title IX. But I'm going to digress from that and just make a small statement because I was privileged to this workshop. Now remember, we are talking in the 70s, okay? No cells. We were still on party lines, no computers, none of this stuff. So when I say a workshop, I meant a gathering of people and whatever. The person that was the head speaker was Anita Bryant. And for those of you who remember, she was poster child for against homosexual. I mean, the end all, everything and everything. And I will never forget, a woman got up there and she was speaking, and I must have been in the South because she started off, honey, let me tell you, there is a big difference between men and women. And whether they remove their body parts or add their body parts,
That doesn't matter. In the end, it's what are you, after you remove your body parts and everything and you switch them around, I'll respect you for whatever you want to represent you for. But as long as you got your body parts, you're a man or you're a woman. You know, and then which really is surprising in retrospect, because she predicted the unisex bathrooms and all this stuff. But the thing that was amazing in retrospect was she said, now when it comes to playing sports, I just don't know that removal of body parts makes any darn difference. And she said, and I guess if you think about it, whatever criteria you make for the men, you know, as far as chemical, these tests that you have to take and everything else, just like horses do and everything, she said, I guess that's what we should have for men and for women, if you can pass those kinds of tests. And I never thought how profound that woman really was. I mean, you know, but let me get to the second point, the more active point.
Do that.
Currently, yeah, currently there is in legislation on the federal level that is kind of addressing all of this. And it's backed away. And it's the fact that kids today are being bullied in online, that they remove the face of the one person and put them on the, you know, the sex body, and they do all this other stuff. And this legislation is basically saying to the school, once you're notified of it, that you have within, you know, once the internet is notified of it, they have 48 hours to remove it. And that was a major thing to figure out a way to enforce that and to do it. The interesting part is the school, because one of the cases that was brought forth was that the school was notified, they even knew who was doing it and everything else, and yet nothing was done. And the school said, this is not our issue. Because, and they said, we're here to educate. We are not social workers. We are not policemen. This belongs into the judicial system. And so they brought up all of those kinds of things. And now they have a law that is being proposed. It's currently active. I don't know the House number. I don't know the Senate number for it, or the House number. It is bipartisan. I believe it's Khan or somebody out of California is the Democrat that's the big one on it. But the whole thing is, it brings to focus the whole issue of who is responsible for this kind of stuff. What about, they presented, what about homeschool? Or what if you go to a private school and this happens? I mean, you know, so
Okay,
let's want to say.
We eventually want to let her go, but BJ, you wanted to say something. We'll make that the last question.
From the nurse of 50 years, first, I just really like to thank this young person. Thank you for your bravery. And I hope that you could feel the love, because we are all here to be educated and to continue learning. So as someone was speaking earlier about way back when, I remember when my neighbors would be fighting and my father would go over to calm them down. And these were gay people. And back in my day, because I'm 75 now, if you were gay, you got beat up and exercised. So it is imperative that we remember what kinds of things have gotten us to this point. One particular thing is, sometimes at childbirth, individuals have two sets of visible, and sometimes only through sonograms and x-ray could they also see a second set of sex organs. At that time, it was the physician who made the call, may not have even discussed it with the parents to save them the trauma of knowing. And then fast forward to when this child becomes a teen or an adult, and they're trying to determine, well, what's wrong with me? We're all human beings. Everyone deserves the respect of being such. I want to ask you, because I'm trying to get an understanding of the law, because Title IX is a quote law and quote. Is it not that it is a responsibility of the person who has been offended, the survivor, that they are to not sue the state or federal, that they actually have to sue the institution, the school. That's my first one. And then secondly, how are you able to keep up with all the changes that are bombarding you? And you come out and do a presentation